Welcome to Dark Feed, where once you find the feed, it finds you. You don't expect to find a body in a high school gym, especially not rolled up inside a wrestling mat, upside down, shoeless, bloodless, and not just dead, but missing parts. This is the story of Kendrick Johnson, and this is how horror hides behind gym doors, in clean hallways, in schools that don't speak, and in stories that were rewritten before they ever began. January 11th, 2013. Lowndes High School, Valdosta, Georgia. A regular Friday. Class changes, pop quizzes, basketball practice, and a student who didn't come home. Kendrick Johnson, 17 years old, 5 feet 10 inches, a football player, track athlete, quiet, kind, focused. He loved his family. He hated trouble. And that day he vanished. He was seen in the halls, seen walking toward the old gym, the less used one. Then nothing. No exit. No calls. No sign he ever left the building. That night, his family reported him missing. By the next morning, they were handing out flyers. And by the time police took it seriously, it was already too late. Because Kendrick was still in the building. Not alive. Not moving. Still. Waiting. January 11th, around 10 a.m., a group of students walked into the old gym. Smelled weird. Sweet. Sour. Rotten. They looked around. And that's when they saw it. One of the rolled-up wrestling mats, upright, stored vertically, had shoes sticking out the top. Just toes. Someone grabbed a chair, looked in, and screamed. Inside the mat was Kendrick. Face down. Head first. Stuck like a cork in a bottle. Shoes at his feet. Socks around his ankles. One arm bent beneath him. One above his head. No visible injuries. Just dried blood near his nose and mouth. He wasn't moving. And he hadn't moved in hours. He was already gone. The gym was locked down. Police arrived. Students evacuated. The scene was sealed, but not for long. Before Kendrick's parents were even informed, the rumors had already started. He fell in looking for a shoe. It was an accident. He did it to himself. The explanations came before the evidence. Let's stop here. Let's say this was your child, and you were told calmly that he climbed into a rolled-up wrestling mat to retrieve a shoe and died. Would you believe that? Because Kendrick's family didn't, and neither should you. Let's break down the official story. Kendrick shared his gym shoes with a friend. They were kept in the corner of the gym, often thrown into the hollow centers of the wrestling mats, which were stored vertically. According to the sheriff's department, Kendrick must have climbed up onto the mats, seen his shoe inside one, tried to retrieve it headfirst, got stuck, and suffocated. Simple, tragic, but not suspicious, unless you ask literally any question. First, the mat's diameter. It was 6 feet tall, rolled, with a 14-inch opening in the middle. Kendrick's shoulders were over 19 inches wide. Second, the reach. Kendrick's arm span was around 76 inches. The mat's depth from opening to floor was over 80. Even if he was dangling, he couldn't reach the bottom. And if he was upside down for hours, where was the blood pooling? Because he had very little bruising.
No petechial hemorrhaging.
No signs of trauma from pressure. And yet, he was declared dead by positional asphyxia, suffocated by the angle of his body. They closed the case. Just like that. Kendrick's family was not satisfied. They pushed for more. And more came. Worse came. The autopsy raised questions. He had some bruising, but it was vague, unexplained. There were inconsistencies in time of death, uncertainty about his positioning, but the body was sent home and buried until someone sent his parents a photo, a leaked image taken in the morgue. Kendrick's face was swollen, misshapen, lips torn, eyes bulging. He looked beaten. That's when his parents exhumed his body. And that's when the story turned from strange to horrifying. Autopsy number 2, conducted by an independent pathologist. New conclusion: Kendrick Johnson died from blunt force trauma. Not an accident, not suffocation. He was killed. But there's more. Inside his body, there were no organs. His skull had been stuffed with newspaper, his chest cavity empty. Every major organ had been removed. Heart, lungs, brain, liver, gone. When asked, the funeral home said they received the body that way, that the organs had been destroyed during the first autopsy. But the GBI denied that. They said they returned everything. So who's lying? Where did Kendrick's insides go? And why? You don't remove a boy's organs by accident. You don't stuff him with newspaper unless you're hiding something. And you don't leave answers in a gym mat unless you never expected the questions. Let's go back to the school. Kendrick was seen on security cameras entering the gym. But the footage, when reviewed, was choppy. Sections were missing. Timestamps were off. One angle never showed him at all. Police said it was a glitch. But surveillance doesn't glitch for an exact window of time. The exact window Kendrick was last seen alive. Something had been tampered with, and someone didn't want us to know what happened in that gym. There were students of interest, people Kendrick had fought with in the past, kids with family in law enforcement. They were questioned, and then they weren't, because the case had been closed. Remember?
Accident. No suspects.
No crime, only a shoe, a mat, and a dead boy inside it. But Kendrick's family didn't stop. They protested, filed lawsuits, begged for federal intervention. In 2016, a U.S. attorney opened a case. It lasted 3 years, over 100 interviews, thousands of pages, and then closed. Again, no charges.
No conclusions.
Just silence. Meanwhile, Kendrick remained underground, twice buried, once emptied, never answered for. The truth was too buried to reach, and the system had already decided.
Accident.
3 syllables that can shut a coffin for good. But the facts don't die, and the image of a boy face down in a gym mat doesn't fade. Not if you've seen it, not if you've lived it, and not if you were there that day when Kendrick Johnson never came home. If you walk into a crime scene with a conclusion already in your head, you don't see evidence. You see confirmation. That's how they handled Kendrick Johnson's death. As an accident, from the start, before the tape was measured, before the autopsy was finished, before the body was even cold. But the truth didn't stay buried. It never does. Because when Kendrick's family fought back, they didn't just find red flags. They found missing time, broken cameras, mismatched wounds, and a body emptied of its secrets. This is the part of the story where denial meets documentation. And we ask, how do you misplace a boy's internal organs? After Kendrick's body was found inside the gym mat, his family was told positional asphyxia. He got stuck upside down, his body weight pressed on his chest. He couldn't breathe, and nobody noticed for hours. But here's the problem. None of the physical evidence lines up. Let's talk about the shoe. The shoe Kendrick was supposedly trying to retrieve. It was under his head. If he had reached down headfirst for the shoe, it would have fallen past him to the bottom. Instead, it was behind his skull, and there was no blood on the shoe, but there was blood found nearby, on the gym floor, on the wall, blood that didn't match Kendrick's DNA. So whose was it? No one ever said. Then there was the sweatshirt, a gray hoodie found near the scene, unclaimed, unknown. DNA? Never processed.
No suspect.
No test. Just a hoodie sitting in an evidence locker. Because they weren't looking for a killer. Remember? They had already decided this was a tragedy, not a crime. And so they stopped investigating before they even started. But Kendrick's parents refused to let it go. They hired a private pathologist, exhumed their son, and what they found changed everything. The second autopsy concluded that Kendrick had died from non-accidental blunt force trauma. There were signs of a blow to the neck and jaw, strong enough to kill him. The kind of damage you don't get falling into a soft mat. And then there was the detail no parent should ever have to hear. His organs were gone. The body cavity was empty. The skull had been stuffed with crumpled newspaper. This wasn't a mistake. It was a cover-up. Or at the very least, gross negligence. The funeral home said the organs were destroyed due to natural processes. But experts called that explanation ridiculous. Organs don't just vanish. They're preserved, stored. They don't get thrown away like trash. The GBI, Georgia Bureau of Investigation, claimed they returned the body intact after autopsy. But when asked for paperwork, they refused. And no one could prove what really happened. Just finger-pointing, just silence, and a boy with no lungs to test for suffocation, no brain to examine for trauma, just newspaper, stuffed where the truth used to be. Then came the footage. Kendrick was last seen entering the gym, heading toward the mats. But when police reviewed the school's surveillance footage, they found something bizarre. The camera closest to the gym had a missing block of time, about an hour, from exactly when Kendrick would have been inside. Other cameras showed glitches, skipped seconds, frozen frames, and perhaps most strange, the footage showed Kendrick walking toward the gym, but never showed him entering it. He just vanished, mid-frame, like something or someone cut the feed. Law enforcement blamed a technical issue. Said the cameras were motion-triggered, that nothing was deleted. But Kendrick's family got experts to review the files, and they didn't agree. The frames were intentionally removed, they said, manipulated, edited, not just a malfunction, but a manual redaction. And suddenly, this case wasn't just mysterious. It was corrupted. So who would do that? And why? Let's talk about the boys. There were whispers from the beginning about two brothers, white students, known to have argued with Kendrick in the past. One had been on the same football team. There was a fight, an incident. The other had ties to law enforcement. Their father, an FBI agent. At first, it was all rumor. But Kendrick's family named the brothers in a wrongful death lawsuit. The brothers denied everything, said they weren't near the gym that day, had no involvement, no charges were filed. But when the U.S. Department of Justice got involved, they opened a 3-year investigation, hundreds of interviews, dozens of subpoenas, thousands of documents, and then, case closed, no charges, no public statement, files sealed. Kendrick's family wasn't just up against the school, they were up against the system. And every time they pushed, it pushed back harder. They were sued, fined, challenged in court. They buried their son. Then they dug him back up. Then they buried him again. And still, no justice. Only silence. Only grief. Only questions. The school never released a full timeline of that day. The camera footage was never restored. The blood evidence never followed up. And the hoodie? Still sitting in evidence, unclaimed, untested. Let's ask the hardest question. If Kendrick was white, would this have happened the same way? If the organ removal, the missing footage, the untested blood, all belonged to a student from a wealthy white family, would we still be calling this an accident? Or would someone already be in prison? Because even the accident story doesn't make sense. If Kendrick got stuck, he would have screamed. There were students in the gym, right there, just feet away. But no one heard anything.
No shouting. No struggle.
No help, because Kendrick didn't fall. He was placed, post-mortem, folded, stuffed into a space he couldn't have fit into on his own, and left to be found by kids. That's what this story really is. A horror, not a jump scare. Not a monster in the shadows, but the kind of horror where truth is buried, justice is sealed, and everyone pretends it was just a tragic mistake. Even when you know better, you think horror ends when the body is found. But what if the horror is what's missing? Not the life, not the breath, but what's taken after. The parts of a person that are removed with silence. Kendrick Johnson's body was found in 2013, but 10 years later, the truth still isn't. Not because we can't find it, but because someone already decided it didn't matter. This is the final part of the story, and by the end, you'll understand. It's not the mat that traps you. It's the system. 2 autopsies. 2 completely different conclusions. Autopsy number 1. Positional asphyxia. Kendrick got stuck upside down. Died trying to reach his shoe. Autopsy number 2. Blunt force trauma. Someone hit him, hard enough to kill him, then left him to be found. But there was a problem. Kendrick's body had been emptied. His organs were gone. His skull stuffed with newspaper. The truth had already been buried. Literally. In 2018, Kendrick's family exhumed the body a 3rd time. Autopsy number 3. This time performed by William Anderson, another independent pathologist. He confirmed it again. Blunt force trauma, likely from a 45-pound dumbbell, based on the impact pattern. His neck was damaged. His carotid artery possibly ruptured. This was no accident. This was violence. But no one had been arrested. Not a single charge filed. So why? Because everything about Kendrick's death had already been decided before the second body bag was zipped. The Lowndes County Sheriff's Office, the original investigating agency, refused to admit any wrongdoing. In fact, they doubled down. In 2021, Sheriff Ashley Polk reopened the case. But instead of a clean slate, it was a media stunt. He reviewed the files, held a press conference, and then told the world, "There is no crime here, no new charges, no new suspects, just the same conclusion. Accident." He even released a 16-page summary, citing conspiracy theories and blaming social media for misinformation. But that summary didn't answer the missing organ question. It didn't address the altered surveillance footage. It ignored the hoodie, the untested blood, the bruises. It gave closure to him, but not to the family, not to the truth. Let's rewind. Let's go back to the idea that Kendrick got stuck in the mat. If he had, his arms wouldn't be in 2 different positions. One above his head, one pinned underneath. If he had, there would be signs of struggle, broken nails, bruising, bleeding, but there weren't. If he had, his weight would have torn the mat or collapsed it. But the mat was fine. He didn't fall in. He was placed, and every piece of evidence says so. Then there's the time gap. He was last seen entering the gym between 1:09 and 1:27 p.m. on the school's cameras. His body wasn't found until the next morning. That's more than 18 hours. 18 hours in a public building. And no one saw him. No one heard him. No one checked the mats. Why? Because someone made sure no one would. Kendrick's father believes his son was lured into the gym, that he was attacked, killed, then hidden. Others believe it was a prank gone wrong, a fight that escalated, panic. But none of that explains the aftermath. None of it explains the organ removal, the surveillance tampering, the refusal to charge anyone, the blocking of every effort to reopen the case. Here's something else to consider. The FBI. 2 individuals named in the original wrongful death suit were the sons of an FBI agent. That agent allegedly had access to the investigation and connections inside the local sheriff's office. The case file, the federal one, was sealed. Why? They say it's because there was no evidence of wrongdoing. But why seal something that proves innocence? Why protect people who did nothing? Because maybe they didn't do nothing. Maybe they did everything. The family received surveillance video from the school only after fighting for it in court. But the version they got had hours of missing footage, time gaps, skipped timestamps, Experts said the files had been altered. The original tapes, gone, deleted, or hidden. We'll never know. It's not just what we see. It's what we're never allowed to. The unanswered questions are like bloodstains under new paint. We can still feel them, even if no one will acknowledge they're there. By 2022, the Johnson family had buried their son 3 times, paid for 3 autopsies, filed multiple lawsuits, faced public ridicule, received death threats, all for the right to say, he didn't do this to himself, and they still haven't won. No one has been held accountable. Not the investigators, not the school, not the funeral home, not the potential suspects. Every avenue the family pursued was blocked. They were told to move on. But how do you move on when your child's body was returned hollow? How do you find peace in newspaper where a brain should be? How do you believe in justice when it looks you in the face and turns away? Let's ask again. If Kendrick Johnson was white, would this have been different? Would they have said accident? Would they have refused the blood test? Would they have ignored the video gaps? Or would someone have been handcuffed by now? The scariest part of the story isn't just that Kendrick Johnson died. It's that the truth died too. Not with a gunshot, not with a scream, but with silence, with paperwork, with erasure, an empty body in a padded gym mat, and a message to the rest of us. You're only safe if they say you are. There is no ending to the story. Only a locked file, only sealed records, only parents who dig up their son again and again and again, hoping for something that looks like justice. But justice doesn't live here. Only memory, only blood in the walls, only shoes sticking out of a mat, only a missing voice that once said, "I'll be home after practice."